So welcome everybody. We are now being live streamed and we're live. So welcome. We're going to get started. We have a great guest. Actually, we have two wonderful guests today.
Did we just lose Brett?
I think we lost our host.
I think we lost Brett.
I think we might have.
He'll probably dial in just a second, but
We love technology.
Yes.
I think we're still live, and so I'm actually going to just introduce the panelists. And so Brett Furman is a broker, owner of Remax Classics in St. David's. He has over 1,000 real estate transactions, which means he's made of steel, and many other qualities on the PowerPoint that you'll all get. We also have a special guest, Lydia Gemmer. And so Lydia, shall I introduce you?
I'm happy to introduce myself. Hi, everybody.
Okay.
I'm happy to be here, and I'm so delighted that Linda's joining us. I've known about Linda and her firm for so many years. I've heard presentations. She's truly an expert. I consider myself an expert in senior living. I am currently the director of personal care at Beaumont at Bryn Mawr and have an extensive background in senior care. And I like to say personally and professionally, because I've been dealing with my elderly in-laws, parents, etc., advising friends for a long time. So it's really great that Brett is putting together this series of presentations to provide valuable information to everybody. I think that this will be a great session, something I'm very passionate about, Linda, I'll say, because I'm always talking to people about advanced directives, power of attorney, planning, which we talked a lot about in our last session, being proactive in our planning as well. So hopefully we'll get Brett back.
And if we don't, we'll just wing it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just forge ahead.
Tracy, did you want to just introduce yourself and then?
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, I'm Tracy and I work with the Brett Furman Group. I've been working with Brett for about 3 years now.
Wonderful.
And he is a wonderful broker. He knows a lot about the industry, and he's a caring broker, which I really enjoy working with. Someone that really cares about their clients and goes that extra mile, extra step. There he is.
On cue, as if he was trying to do this the entire time. Brett, we've done all the introductions.
Thank you.
And everything just went fine. And so if you'd like, we can begin the presentation, or if you'd like to just have your introductory remarks.
Oh, I'm not sure. Brett, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep. I don't have access to the PowerPoint. So if you'd like to put the PowerPoint up, then we can start with that.
Share the screen. I apologize. I had a little technical glitch, if you will.
Zoom traffic.
Yeah, a little Zoom traffic or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So it's like the good and bad with technology. I'm so grateful my husband's upstairs and I'm texting him, help, I can't get the volume up.
Bear with me. Let me bring it up.
If it's not available, that's okay. I have it available and I can just go and.
Yeah, why don't you start while I try to get it going? That would be awesome.
Yep. And so my understanding. Okay, great.
Sorry about that. I hit a button and sometimes you hit things and you don't know exactly what you hit.
That laser button really must have blown things out. Yep.
There we go. So what the number one question I get from everybody right now is, should I stay in my home or move, and what are the options, right? We covered a lot of that at our first webinar that we did. And for those that are on the call that maybe missed that, we can, if you send us a note and you want a copy of that, we'll be happy to. We'll have this one available as well. If somebody misses it and wants a copy, feel free. But what came up as a result of the last webinar was a lot of the elder law issues. So hence we brought on Linda Anderson today. Likewise, we'll do the same thing for our next one based on what kind of questions and things that come as a result of this. That's how we're going to schedule our next speaker. And the one thing I always like to start with is those on the call, you have access to our concierge. Those are people on the call that maybe you're never thinking of moving. Maybe you're going to stay in your house and you just need help with things. Any types of things, like you need an elder lawyer. Well, we have one here for you. Maybe you need a painter, a plumber, whatever that is, feel free to call us anytime and we'll connect you with those vendors at any time. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Linda and kind of throw the first question, which is, when should someone hire an elder lawyer?
So I think it's fair to say nobody wants to ever hire any lawyer.
Good point.
So really, ever, right? And so what's interesting about hiring an elder law attorney, many people assume that you have to be of a certain age in order to benefit from the type of legal services that we provide. And so what I would say is that, yes, we serve a lot of elders, but we also serve a lot of other people of all ages, including infants all the way up to elders. And so the type of practice under the umbrella of elder law includes ordinary estate planning, includes ordinary estate administration. But the sweet spot with elder law recognizes that some people are actually going to be what's on a continuum of care, that they may actually have an acute illness or a diagnosis, and they're going to need support for their life in terms of activities of daily living. And so when people are struggling to find resources or to use their savings or to leverage the care that a spouse or an adult child's providing, the idea is how do you actually manage disability issues? So we know how to manage it when somebody happens to pass away, but it's much more difficult if someone's disabled and they're not passing away, they're going to live a long time. And so we have families with special needs children who have just been born. We have people that have had just catastrophic injuries that are now disabled. And we do have a lot of elders that are trying to age in place or recognizing that it's time to make the next transition. So when is it the time to hire a lawyer? Nobody wants to hire a lawyer, but let's just say this. I have two sons. When they turned 18, what they got for their birthday was a young adult estate planning package, because we really never know when we're going to need someone to help us with the financial power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney. And so the idea is that this surrogate decision-making and set of documents you put in a file you hope you never need, but every adult should take responsibility for getting their own estate plan. So my feeling is when do you hire a lawyer? You get it over with as soon as you can at the time that you become an adult.
So basically, it's never too early, I guess, to engage someone like yourself. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's never too early, and it's never too late, especially with elder law. The concern is that sometimes people will say, oh my goodness, it's too late, and we'll go through some of those scenarios. But the idea is that this list of necessary documents that you have to protect yourself is actually an important explanation of why getting your estate plan done, even if things are just fine, is really important. And the idea is that it's very hard to think of a day when you might actually pass away. It's even harder to think about a time when you may actually need support with a surrogate decision maker, somebody who stands next to you as an agent. And so a POA is a power of attorney. And the idea is that there's a general power of attorney that's very strong that allows this agent to do many things, including administrative bill paying, but also stepping into your shoes for big transactions. We have federal estate tax issues that we know that are going to change in 2026. We've just had major changes to what happens to retirement accounts under the Secure Act. There are things happening all the time. And if you lose your capacity, you want your agent under your power of attorney to be able to step into your shoes and do those important adjustments for your estate plan. Advanced directives is another term for a living will. But in addition to a living will, there should be a healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney is going to have who is actually your chain of command as your surrogate decision maker for medical decisions. You go into a hospital and you're being counseled on an operation. The doctor will give you the pros and cons, the risks, the benefits, the other choices, and then you make a decision. If you can't make that decision and give informed consent, you should have a healthcare power of attorney that says who's making those important decisions for you. And if we had more time, I would go through what are the backups, the safety nets that are in place. If you don't have a power of attorney
Right.
and something critical happens, you're going to end up with a guardianship. That's expensive and time consuming. If you can't make medical decisions, Pennsylvania has a statute and it'll pick who your decision maker is. Well, not all children have the same ability to make good decisions, and you want to be able to make sure that you're getting ahead of that and having your own thing. So proper documents for anybody of any age is a will, a power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, living will, and we also add a HIPAA. Footnote there, everybody wants to know, why aren't I saying living trust? That's a whole nother hour. But the idea is that there are states that living trusts are critical.
Lydia, this is a question more for Lydia, and it does tie into what Linda's saying is, what happens at the entry point of, someone coming into a personal care or memory care or skilled nursing? Are all these isn't that all things that are necessary in order to gain entry?
It's not necessary, but it's advisable. And we do push wherever I have worked to make sure that somebody has the durable power of attorney for financial and for particularly medical considerations, also advanced directives. I have had at least 2 situations where the documents were not in place. One ended up being a guardianship because of a psychiatric diagnosis, and also, being elderly and living in a personal care community. It was a very difficult, very lengthy process. I had another situation where there were no documents in place, and the elderly woman, assumed her neighbor was there for her, and her neighbor was there for her for a while. But as she progressed in her dementia, the neighbor decided, hey, this is too much for me. It literally said, stop calling me, I'm not coming in. And so we really had no choice but to, push for the guardianship. And these are not fun processes, and these are not fun situations to be in. So again, and I'll preach it again and again, being proactive and having the documents in place. I actually have a question for Linda in terms of how frequently one should be reviewing, like their will, their powers of attorney.
Love that question.
Yeah, how you select your power of attorney. What if you don't have children? What if you have a lot of children? I have residents that can have like 9 children. How do you decide? Also, the scenario when you are selecting, maybe you have 2 kids and you have them both down and they don't agree. So these are all like the nightmare scenarios that I've dealt with, and I'm sure Linda can speak to as well.
So the nightmare scenarios are what we specialize in
avoiding. Yes.
Avoiding, but also resolving if I have.
Yeah, right.
So if we are lucky enough to be talking to the client in advance, I can't tell you how many times people have said, well, I'm going to put the firstborn as number 1, the secondborn as number 2, number 3, and so on. And the idea is that parent thought, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I love them all.
Yep.
But if you think about it, you're hiring somebody for a position. And so we want the right skill set. We want somebody who is going to actually be able to assume the burden of worry when you're really vulnerable. And so it is not always the firstborn. I happen to be a firstborn, but so I kind of tend to like that approach, but that's not the right approach. The idea is you may actually have 2 children and one is going to be much better. And when you talk about siblings that don't get along, I have had more than one client come in and say, I'm going to name them both. And I know they don't work well together. I know they've never, gotten along since they were 3 and 5. But the bottom line is I'm going to make them work together on my document. And I'll say, well, you're not going to be able to get that drafted by me. We craft our documents for success.
I love that.
Build our documents for real serious situations. And I'm not going to set you up for failure. And so we can have it so that the person that's going to assume personal responsibility will have a duty to account and keep transparent information flowing, but there's going to be one decision maker. And so sometimes I'll say, blame it on me. The lawyer said you couldn't have more than one. The lawyer said, whatever you want, fill in the blank. And the idea is that we build the documents for success. So the question you also raised was, how often do you review them? There's actually a checklist that you can, we can send to everybody, which says, you know, has somebody passed away in your family? Have you inherited money? Has there been a change in tax law? So there's actually a checklist, but generally every 3 to 5 years, you should be looking at your situation and your documents and saying, look at this, we named these people as healthcare agents, they've moved. You know, we put our contact information in our documents. They've moved. Let's get it updated. You know, the tax law is going to change in 2026. So for those high net worth people, put that on your radar every 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
And one of the nice things I think about Linda, and I was looking at your very, very impressive background, and what I called to attention was I saw you have a tax background, which that's got to be so helpful with what you do and counseling people, that I can't imagine how an elder law could consult without that kind of background.
Yeah, although, you know, there are people that have tax backgrounds and who live in the world of calculations and, you know, really high level planning. For me, I was being teed up for high level planning and highest net worth estate planning. But what I found is that what I really love is elder law and special needs. So there are things that overlap. So I'm also a member of ACTEC, which is, you know, again, more estate planning for a higher level. But I actually have had an experience working in elder law since 1987. So I really have the background in the estate planning and interesting income tax issues, but I also love the social work aspect and the care management and coordination and advocacy of the elder law. So, you know, yes, I have sort of a very good background, and I'm lucky that I even have a great staff.
So I guess getting back to where we were, it's, you know, we talked last time in our original workshop, the ABCs of Senior Housing. We were talking with Lydia about the aging in place, moving in with the kids. We were talking about proactive and reactive. And for those on the call, I thought it might be helpful just to give you a quick overview on the proactive side. And Lydia, please correct me if you think I need to make any adjustments. I have the CCRCs, I have the personal care, the memory care, and skilled nursing in that arena. And reactive, I look at as more crisis-driven situations where we're talking about assisted living, personal care, memory care, and skilled nursing.
Yeah. It's all about planning.
Okay. So, Linda, what's your commentary? I know we have limited time and everything, but any legal considerations on, because someone on the call did mention, and I forget the area, but I thought it was somewhere in Montgomery County, they want to age in place. I'm sure we have people on the call that are looking at all these different possibilities. Any legal overview for these various options?
Yes. And so the firm is actually a member of an association called the Life Care Planning Law Firm Association. And there's a wonderful educational tool that the association has that has what's called the Continuum of Care. So we all we want to be an independent and fully independent of activities of daily living. But sometimes you need some home health care. Sometimes you need personal care to support maybe the meal prep. Sometimes you need, beyond personal care, you may need assisted living. In Pennsylvania, we have very few assisted living. And then we have skilled nursing facility. And so as the person needs more support, you move up the continuum of care. As you move up the continuum of care, the expenses to support you go up. And so what's interesting about Lydia and her background is the concept of a continuing care retirement community, which is abbreviated CCRC. And in Pennsylvania, a CCRC is defined as any level of care that's more than one level of care with a contract that goes for more than 1 year. So for people that are looking to age in place, when they enter into a CCRC, they are going in as independent and with different types of financial commitments. And the contracts for CCRCs used to be much simpler than they are now.
Right.
But if you're independent and you're proactive, you may decide, I want to go into a CCRC, and that way I know if I need personal care, if I need skilled care, I know exactly where I'm going to get it. And if I and my spouse go in and one of us needs a higher level of care, we're going to be on the same campus. We have a hospitalization, we need rehab, we know exactly where we're going, and we'll come right back. So CCRCs are a really interesting choice. They are not actually purchasing real estate, which is sometimes confusing. They're
Right.
actually regulated as insurance.
Mhm.
So it's interesting when you start to look at the true ABCs of senior living, this personal care, which is PC, AL, assisted living, SNF, skilled nursing facility, CCRC, all that is a continuum of care with different regulations, and each level of care has a target resident that it's appropriate for.
Mhm.
All of us want to stay down at independent.
Of course.
All of us. And the question is that possible? So I had a client call, husband and wife situation, and the husband had had a very significant fall, significant hospitalization. And so the concern was, is it time to update their documents? They weren't even calling about elder law. And I said, let me predict. I bet your laundry facilities are down in the basement. And I predict your full bath is on the second floor.
Second floor.
And I predict that what you're saying is you're going to put a hospital bed in your dining room or your living room, and you're going to have a commode. Okay. I can help support that care plan. But I can also tell you that this isn't optimal. And so when it's time to actually make a transition along the continuum of care, we all want to be in the least restrictive setting that's safe. And we can make certain things safe, but you have to somehow build in the next level of care, no matter where you go. And so we try to support people where they are because it's a process. Not everybody's ready to leave their home of 50 years and go to somewhere new just because adult children may be wringing their hands, but it's a process. And the idea is to get real about the conversation and to show the continuum of care and to try to have a process where everybody's heard and respected, but we get real about the transitions. And so in some cases, we have people with very modest nest eggs with very ambitious plans to stay home. And so I may actually be the first person that's telling them this is going to be a true challenge. And so it's very interesting when you have the legal conversation. It's not just a legal technical conversation. It's actually the social worker piece, which is why we actually have 2 social workers on our staff.
Sounds like some of the stuff we deal with on the real estate side. I mean,
It's all the same problem.
yeah.
And the idea is that, as long as people have capacity, if somebody says to me, I know that if I have one more fall and I break a hip, I know I'm probably going to end up in a nursing home. Okay, that person has capacity and they understand the risks they're assuming. The difficulty is for the people that aren't necessarily aware of their difficulties, aware of the risk that they're assuming. And so it's sometimes, it's a different kind of conversation where you have to get somebody with a new voice and have the, it's just challenging. Now it's interesting. You talk about technical things. I'm getting an alert that they're going to restart my computer, but I just dismissed it. So we're getting all kinds of Saturday morning things.
Yeah, everybody has technical challenges.
Yep.
And home challenges. So I know we're on time. Do you want to get into any of the CCRC stuff as well, or?
Absolutely. And so I happen to have a wonderful friend and colleague, Catherine Pearson, who is a professor at Dickinson Law School.
Ah.
She's nationally known for her work in CCRCs. And so on 3 occasions, I was lucky enough to be presenting with her and also a representative from the Pennsylvania Department of Insurance on CCRCs. And so for me, I really love the concept of a CCRC because people are telling me they want to age in place, that they don't really want to have to worry about transitions, and that they really want to make sure that they're not burdens to their children. They want to know that they're not going to outlive their money. And so for the right person, considering a CCRC means that they are actually not only going to be medically underwritten to make sure that they're going in as independent, they're going to be financially qualified to make sure that they're actually going to have enough money for the CCRC arrangement, which explains why a CCRC is regulated as an insurance product. People don't realize that when they're considering a CCRC and they're looking at this beautiful decorated model, they're actually making a choice as to how to age. And so when you actually are doing a review of a CCRC arrangement, you have to first understand, is it for profit or nonprofit? Okay. Who actually runs the CCRC? How many levels does the CCRC encompass? Independent and just personal care with memory care, or independent personal care, skilled nursing? And there is a new label of memory care that is sometimes confusing to consumers because they assume that memory care is a skilled nursing environment. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. And that's actually a big deal.
Right.
And so if you're evaluating, and again, Lydia, if you want to jump in at any point, when you want to evaluate a CCRC, don't just stop at the beautiful decorated model. Go make sure you're touring.
Right.
I always start the tours, show me the highest level of care that you have. Then we'll go down, then we'll go down, and then we'll look at the independent, beautifully decorated model.
You are absolutely right. And I apologize. Something's with my volume. I understand I'm louder than everybody, but I am kind of loud. So apologies. But Linda is absolutely correct. And I know many, many years ago, I worked at a different CCRC. And in terms of touring, there would be people who would come and only see the cottages, the apartments, and would absolutely refuse to walk through the health center. And it would be so frustrating to me because the lack of understanding that those are critically important to know about. But we see that all the time, but it can't be emphasized enough that you really do need to understand the healthcare offerings. And as Linda was talking about, there are different variations of CCRCs. They're, as she said, for-profit, not-for-profit. They might have personal care or assisted living. They may or may not have memory care, and they may or may not have skilled nursing. And I think that's a really important point too, because of course, everybody assumes they're never going to need any of these levels of care. But I do know of a large community, actually a company that has a number of communities, but some of their communities do not have skilled nursing. And part of the contract is that they will provide skilled nursing, but you have to understand that if you're moving into XYZ, you might have to go to ABC for the skilled nursing part. So I do feel very strongly that anybody considering a CCRC should be having an elder law attorney look at the contract so they truly know what levels of care and what services are provided to them.
I think one of the things that we always try to emphasize with the prospective resident is that in exchange for the continuing care, there has to be a realization that the decisions that are going to be made about what level of care is appropriate for you will actually be influenced by the community. It's not as if you always get to decide only by yourself as to what's the appropriate level of care. And so when I think about sometimes what are the most tense situations for residents of a CCRC, it's for when they didn't understand that the community is trying to keep everybody safe, and that there's a needed transition. And the hard conversation is, it's now time for you to move from independent to personal care. When you think about those conversations, Lydia, how do you build in perhaps the home health care, or actually somebody who does need the 24/7 within the higher level? How do you actually do that?
Great question. And in the communities that I'm familiar with, and I suspect for most, there is a resident review process. Typically, the social workers are very involved with that. And it does depend on the community, and you do need to ask about that. I'm familiar with one community where really it's the social workers and that review, but ultimately I will guarantee you anywhere it's going to come down to safety. If you are in your independent living apartment and you're setting things on fire every time you cook, you are putting the whole community at risk. And remember, moving to a CCRC is an insurance product, and it's also a community. So the impact that your behaviors have on neighbors, and as related to safety, will certainly be under discussion. My experience has been, though, that it is not like an incident happens and you move. Most communities are extremely sensitive to this and understanding that people are moving to a CCRC with the intent to stay independent and to stay in the selected unit that they have moved into. So as Linda said, the first step might be, well, gosh, do you need home health services to come in? Do you need to hire a companion? Maybe you need to give up your driver's license, which is very difficult. So who will drive you? You could even have 24/7 care in most of these communities. Now, paying a monthly fee plus an entry fee, if they have one for a CCRC, plus 24/7 gets very expensive. I currently am having that discussion with somebody, paying that and making the person understand the cost of the home care, the 24/7 that's needed would add an additional $18,000 a month. Now, is that realistic for this person? We don't know yet, but we have to have those discussions. But it's a very delicate issue, I would say, right, Linda? Because everybody thinks that they're going to age in place where they are, whether it's their independent home out in the community or it's in a CCRC.
It's a great segue, Lydia, into the thing that I'm most interested in. That's this whole concept of like asset protection. And I was hoping Linda could maybe delve into a little bit of that. And what happens in some of these various options is kind of a two-part question. When somebody runs out of money, and what if it's a for-profit versus a nonprofit? It seems like there's some benefits in the nonprofit world that if you run out of resources, you're not like moved out and you have to go somewhere else.
So when you think about that as a compound question that I will try to pull apart one thing at a time.
Sorry.
That's okay. And if I forget one of the questions, just jump back in. But I think, running out of money when you're at a CCRC typically shouldn't be a difficulty, because many of the communities have what's called a benevolent fund and a benevolent process. And so the monthly fee may be adjusted if the community has the resources, and as a contract provision has said that there is an opportunity to apply for the benevolent fund. And so when you're moving into a continuing care retirement community, most people are expecting the arrangement to be for their entire lives. And so what you'll see at the CCRC level is that there are some communities that are now starting to accept Medicaid, which is also called medical assistance at the higher skilled nursing level, so that they not only have a benevolent fund for people that are at lower levels, but if someone does end up at a skilled nursing level, and if they have depleted their resources, they can go on Medicaid. So the CCRCs, even if it's a nonprofit CCRC, what I would also say is that sometimes those nonprofits are actually being administered or managed by companies that are for-profit companies. And so it's not always what it appears. And that's why it's up to you to sort of open up a lot of the information in the disclosure package that's 3 inches and very dense single space. But the bottom line is that you actually need to know how to shop for a CCRC. And it's not for everybody. One of the questions I'll ask Lydia, just to, as a quick question, when I am counseling families about CCRC options, I do tell them that there may be medical underwriting that they may not meet, but in some cases, the CCRC can still offer them an opportunity to go in for fee for service.
That's absolutely correct. And that's very important to understand, because you might have a couple situation where the one spouse will be offered what's called a care agreement, and the other person doesn't qualify. Perhaps they already have a diagnosis of advanced Parkinson's or dementia. And that's not going to be covered under the CCRC contract. So it's really important to understand that. The other thing, Linda, to your point about the benevolent fund, that's a great point, and many of the nonprofits do offer that. However, I will add a caveat that if you, well, first of all, when you do apply, there's going to be a financial component in terms of, can you even afford this community? And again, on insurance and underwriting. But however, so say you think you're going to run out of money. That's a conversation you need to have with the powers that be at the community. If you choose to spend your money, for example, on 24/7 care in your apartment, that will not probably fly, because then you're choosing to not follow the continuum of care. You're making a choice to spend your financial assets on in-home care when you have other options available to you. So those conversations are really important to have and to understand. Again, we're talking about a proactive decision in moving to a CCRC, because you do have admissions. There's an admissions process and there's admissions qualifications to have with that. I hope I answered that.
And I think, so Brett, I think the slide that you just moved to, we probably want to go back. That's all right.
My apologies.
That's all right. And so we're sort of switching gears to looking at CCRCs as an opportunity to cover all the bases on the continuum of care. And so what really is challenging for people that are not in a CCRC is what happens as you become, more vulnerable and need more support, and you're moving up the continuum of care. And unfortunately, in our country, we don't have a single way to build in safety nets. Medicare is not going to be paying for long-term care. Medicare is your insurance. And so you've saved, and so your savings are available. And the idea is that in some cases, Medicaid, which is a welfare program, will be the safety net. And if there is a wartime vet, sometimes Veterans Aid and Attendance will be used as a safety net. So when people are looking at the continuum of care and starting to worry about, my goodness, I don't know how I can sustain the home health care that may be $25 to $30 an hour, and even getting a 4-hour block 2 times a day seems like an overwhelming expense for somebody that may never have paid any home health care before. And so what the families are doing is they're looking at the nest egg and saying, how do we leverage what we have to truly make it so that the person doesn't outlive their assets? And so Medicaid planning, when done properly, is not actually a way to accelerate any inheritance. It's a way to leverage the person's savings to keep them in the least restrictive setting that's safe. And so we know about the resources that they have, but we also know that sometimes we have adult children that live nearby, or spouses that are no longer working, that are acting as a caregiver. And all of those resources can be leveraged with Medicaid or veterans benefits. And so Medicaid planning, if you look at it as how do we protect money, I can protect all the money you've got immediately, but how do we actually protect people and keeping in the less restrictive setting? That actually requires a balanced approach. And so the idea is that Medicaid planning is only available in Pennsylvania for people that want to stay home and whose income is below a certain cap, $2,350 a month. Okay. And if you have income in excess of that, you will not financially qualify for Medicaid, even if you go down to $8,000. Your income is too high for the Medicaid in the community. And so this is called a facility bias for Medicaid. And so if people need 24/7 care, and then all of a sudden that's $14,000, for 1 month of 24/7 home health care, nobody really, in my most of my clients don't have a nest egg that will support that. And so the idea is, are we proactively, or are we in crisis mode in terms of looking at the Medicaid eligibility? And Medicaid eligibility for a married couple is very different than a single person. And so for those who are listening, who may have spouses that are on the continuum of care that are expected to decline, what you need to know is that the federal law builds in supports for you as a community spouse, really almost without any consideration as to what's at risk.
Mhm.
Said another way, if I have a husband who's in a nursing home and a wife who's the community spouse, the federal law allows us to develop a plan that will accelerate the Medicaid eligibility, and in most cases, it's within months. There are spousal protections built into Medicaid.
Mhm.
There are protections built in for disabled children, for siblings that co-own real estate. There are transfers that are allowed to be made to disabled people. Medicaid planning is also a way to understand the 60-month look-back period and what happens if somebody does make a gift transfer. And there's a whole nother hour of content about Medicaid planning, but the bottom line is that you should never assume there's a 60-month look back.
It might
You
not
should
be.
never assume that a transfer penalty is something that will necessarily hurt the eligibility. There may be reasons why some of that I've explained, where the transfer may have nothing to do with trying to qualify for Medicaid. And that even if there is an existing transfer penalty, we actually get referrals from facilities because of this. There are ways to use remaining assets to cure a transfer penalty. So if you're going to rely on Medicaid, that means you're deciding right now to actually, in some cases, if you know what your income is, that you're choosing to structure your entire estate plan so that you can go to a nursing home and be on Medicaid. I've never had anybody come into my office saying, I want to get to a nursing home and be on Medicaid.
Right.
I
Right.
can see
I've
why.
had people come in
Yeah.
that have said, I want to stay in the least restrictive setting. Now, I want to make a footnote. Being in a nursing home on Medicaid, most nursing homes accept Medicaid. And so out of the 30 that exist in Delaware County, 26 of them or 24 of them accept Medicaid. And some of them are the higher quality, better rated facilities. The fact that they take Medicaid is not a reflection on whether it's a high quality place. And there is a federal law that says you can't discriminate against people on the basis of the source of payment. So the fact that they may have come in with $250,000 and spent down to zero doesn't allow the facility to move them
out.
a quad. Okay. And the idea is that there are protections built in, and that's where the advocacy comes into. So not only do we want to understand Medicaid on how to qualify, we have to understand that, facilities, if they're going to accept Medicaid, have a code of conduct that they need to do to follow. And so it's really important for families to understand it's not just how to protect money and how to qualify for Medicaid, it's how to actually get good quality care.
It all comes down to care and the quality of care.
Yeah.
One of my favorite topics, being in the real estate space, Linda, has to do with the sale of your primary residence. And I think it's the most underutilized, understood tax benefit that's available to anyone that has a primary residence that's thinking about selling. I've been through this personally as a strategy, meaning now that my kids have moved on, I've done this, I'm on my third. So I live in a house for 2 years. This sounds a little unusual. It has some kind of a gain. I take the gain out and I exclude up to $500,000 of federal tax because we file, my wife and I file jointly. I thought you could maybe make it kind of more simplified if you could for those on the call, like what happens if they decide they need to sell a primary residence, and how do you get involved in the tax savings portion of that conversation?
Okay, so what you're talking about is part of the Internal Revenue Code is Section 121. And so Section 121 of the Internal Revenue Code says if you're a married couple and you sell your primary residence and you've lived there for 2 out of 5 years, that you get to exclude capital gains up to $500,000. If you're a single person, you get to exclude $250,000. And so what Brett's saying is that, isn't that great? You can make an investment, have it go up, and have no income tax costs when you sell this primary residence that you've lived in for 2 years. And that's absolutely possible. I have to say, though, the clients that come into my office have never left their homes for decades.
Ever. Yeah.
And so the question that they're looking at is quite different. But for those that are trying to maybe recoup some of the lost retirement savings that they had hoped to have, what's important about Section 121, and I think this is still a misconception, is it used to be a one-time kind of event in your life.
Now,
But Internal Revenue Code Section 121 now doesn't have a limitation on the number of uses. And it's also very heartening to read the code so that if you do lose your spouse, you have an opportunity to continue to get the $500,000 for a short period of time.
what could you elaborate on that? That's a good one.
Yep. What I would say is that there's actually a handout that I can send everybody, but the idea is that there are some really interesting little features. There's also one that if you moved into a facility and that you've lived in the facility, you know, for I think up to a year, there's a way that that will affect Section 121 as well.
Really?
So there are little variations on a theme. So Brett, I know that you're looking at it saying, do you guys realize how much money you could be earning in this market?
Yes.
Just pick up and move every 2 years.
Yes.
My clients are under the old impression that, you know, it's not that I sold and sold a house maybe 20 years ago and I used my one-time exemption and now I'm going to have horrible things. So that's the other thing that I think that my clients are not quite always up to speed on is what happens when somebody dies. And so when you're measuring capital gains, you're measuring it on what's called a basis. What was your purchase price of the property? And so for many of my clients, they may bring in a deed that shows they paid $30,000 for a piece of property.
Yes.
And then now we're looking at the Zillow and it's $300,000 of fair market value. And so the appreciation that we're looking at is something that is a big deal. And so I've had families turn inside out and sell the house to a child for $1, not realizing they have just ruined their Section 121 exemption protection. If you just sold the house for $1, you've made a gift to your child. You decide to move into a CCRC. The settlement check comes out at the settlement table. Who gets that check? The adult child.
Yeah.
Who gets the protection under Section 121? Mom.
No. Yeah.
You have now just triggered a problem. And if we don't have mom actually move to a CCRC, but moves out to another, place or whatever, the idea is that when mom dies, there is, you've avoided inheritance tax of 4.5% on the gift that would have been imposed on the value of the house transferring to that adult child, 4.5%. But we also have given a gift to the child that came with the built-in income tax problem. And so now we're going to have ordinary income for that child. And so when you think about what our families do that makes sense because they want to keep it simple. They always say, I want to keep it simple. Can't you just do a deed? But then when I explain to them how they've just affected their Section 121 exemption, how they've just created a massive Medicaid problem for a 60-year look back, and that they haven't even protected the parent and given them an exclusive right for use and occupancy in their primary residence that they're going to stay at. And even if they gift it, that inheritance tax is still going to apply if you continue to live there. And you may actually have more than one child and giving away your biggest asset with a will that says, I treat all, my children equally. So by keeping it simple, which I can appreciate the goal, they completely miss the point of how do you structure your affairs to maintain the Section 121 exclusion? How do you treat all your children equally? How do you protect yourself for the use and occupancy? All of those things are done with the use of irrevocable trust.
And this is why you need an attorney, right, Linda?
Yeah. It seems to me that the best thing
goodness.
I hope the listeners get out of this today is that we talked about early on, like when is the best time to hire an elder lawyer. It seems even more critical right now that they need to be talking to Linda like yesterday, because you're talking about huge, opportunities and savings that you could be losing by not doing that.
Absolutely.
Well, and to just make sure you put the care first.
Care first.
As much as I know about all of, managing the income tax issues and inheritance tax issues and Medicaid, the idea is that that's secondary to what the plan is that you tell me you want.
Huh. So it's all based.
And that's a great point, Linda, because it's really to get people to think about what is the care that they want, where do they see themselves living, and how are they going to achieve that. And I know if somebody comes to you and they say, you know what, Linda, I'm never leaving my home, that conversation's then, well, what does that look like for you? What, when these things happen? This is what I'm always like passionate about, okay, that's great. That's a great goal. But what happens if this happens? What if you fall? What are, do you have the money? Do you understand how much all these things cost? And that education is so critically important, because you might want one thing in terms of care, but you can't afford it. And so what is realistic? And a lot of times people don't want to talk about that because they don't want to know, but it is so important.
Yeah.
So Linda, I know we're going to probably run out of time, but I was hoping you could address some of the tax considerations of living in a community and medical expenses. Could you spend a little time on that?
If you go to the next slide, I think it covers what happens when you move to a continuing care retirement community. Those communities are actually providing medical services. And so when somebody becomes a resident of a CCRC, there's usually two different financial contributions. One is the entrance fee and one is the monthly payment. And the idea is that, we all know that on our income tax returns, we get a standard deduction that now, because they've doubled it, is actually sometimes high to actually reach and be able to itemize.
Right.
But if you're moving to a continuing care retirement community, the entrance fee may actually have a significant part that is treated as a medical expense. And so when you're looking at the CCRC, and Lydia, I don't know if you are familiar with whatever percentage you're using right now, but it could be, 40% of the entrance fee could be treated as a medical expense. And medical expenses that are in excess of 7.5% of your adjusted gross income get to be deducted. And so you need to sort of look at it where you're selling your house. That's income tax transition number one. You want to exclude your capital gains. And if you're moving into a CCRC, you want to know about the deduction. So when you also think about this for people that may not be moving to a CCRC, but what if you move into a personal care residence? Is it possible to use the appropriate part of the Internal Revenue Code to deduct the monthly expenses for the personal care residence? And I think in our practice, what we do is we will actually send a letter to the doctor who is helping with the care of that resident. And if they can sort of put in place a letter that documents some of the issues that are going to be needed by virtue of the code section, we should be able to deduct the monthly payment.
Right. I think that's important to note, because, and that's the question I was going to ask you, Linda, how that would apply to personal care or to assisted living costs too.
Yeah. And so the idea is that it's not as obvious for people that are in personal care that they're meeting the requirements. Assisted living, that is somebody who's also nursing facility clinically eligible. And that, I think, is a different and easier deduction to get without having to go through the doctor's questionnaire. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to maybe just a quick closing remark. And then I know we've had a lot of questions, Linda. I've seen them come up in the Q&A in the chat, and then maybe open it up to people that have some questions. But, certainly it's not something, I think your opening remarks were very correct, that people just don't think about going out and hiring an attorney, especially an elder lawyer. It's not something you want to do, but it seems like, based on everything I'm hearing, it seems like the benefits, both, financially, and to make sure that your resident gets the best possible care, it's almost like a no-brainer to do that early instead of much later. I mean, that's basically everything I'm hearing sounds like, get someone on your team early and just don't wait. There's just too many issues, and the complexities of all this and the continual change of the law is just amazing, all that goes on.
Yeah, I'm just sitting looking through some of the Q&As.
Thanks.
So let's just start with there's somebody about the very first comment about wanting to age in place in King of Prussia, Montgomery County. And so really the idea is that you can look at CCRCs, which will have a bundled continuum of care, or you can actually look at a standalone personal care or standalone independent, and there may be sister facilities. The idea is, I think, to go where your adult children are, where your church is, where your friends are, so that you actually remain in the community. Another interesting question, budget, proportioning house
Yes.
maintenance, healthcare with regular living expenses. So I don't do financial advising, but it is always amazing to me how someone can come in, and in our area, real estate taxes are so significant.
Oh, yeah.
And the deferred capital maintenance that may exist on a property that's been owned for decades, and how challenging it is to keep ahead with just mowing the lawn. And how determined people are to really remain in that home, even though when you look at the spreadsheet, it may be their biggest asset requiring a lot of their income. That's an easy case to say, you know what, we're going to try to keep this working, but just know that this is very hard, because as you need more care, you're going to need to pull on the equity in your home, and a reverse mortgage, a commercial reverse mortgage, is extremely expensive. And we never want to use the equity to maintain the house if we need it for your care. And so in terms of the budget, when you look at housing costs, I think the rule of thumb is it shouldn't cost more than a third. But what I find is that many people are so attached to the house that even if they're just doing nothing but their real estate taxes, their prescription costs, and the little bit of maintenance, that it's sometimes really hard to recognize the situation for what it is, which is a struggle.
You know what the good news is now, Linda, is that with the way the market is right now being so strong, the residential marketplace, what we found, and you talked about a lot of these senior home sellers have a lot of deferred maintenance. And pre-COVID, we would always counsel and suggest, it's really a good idea to paint and fix the bad sidewalk and do all these things. Well, in the market we're in right now, you can get away with doing almost very little because there's so minimal supply that you don't need to make your home like perfect right now if you're thinking of selling.
You know what, Brett, I'm sorry, I'll add to that. I think the thought of moving is so overwhelming for people when they've been in their primary residence and they have accumulated so many things, but they don't realize that there are resources out there too to help you downsize, if you're moving somewhere, to help you figure out what you should take. And there are really some wonderful companies out there that can assist with that. Because it's not fun to move, as we know, but if you have somebody who can help you, they are out there.
And Tracy, right now, I know you're working on one right now. We have a client who moved into a retirement facility, and I know, Tracy, you went there and found wallpaper that was like literally peeling off the wall and stains on the carpet and all those things. And I know Tracy just met all the vendors and took care of all that, which was really nice.
Absolutely.
It's a great service.
So, and if anybody else on the call who came in maybe late in the beginning, we talked about the concierge. Those on the call, even if you never sell real estate, you're aging in place and you want to keep the house forever, it's okay. You can call us anytime. We have a whole list of resources available for you, from painters, plumbers, handymen, elder attorneys, financial planners, whatever people need. We've had people that have literally handed us keys and said, okay, we're moving to this facility. Can you handle everything? And we had one recently, which is it kind of will speak to that. And this was a client that had an individual living in the house that had some significant health issues and wasn't able to maintain the house. And the client was in Ohio, and they called us to sell the property, and we had to figure out what to do with everything in the house. And the best part of the story was there was one piece of medical equipment at the end. It's called a Hoyer. It's like a lift. It's a very expensive lift. And what we did is we went to Surrey Services, which is active in this marketplace, and they were looking, actually, they were going to buy one. So our client basically donated it to Surrey Services. So it went to use. I'm not suggesting everything else in the house was, we were able to, because some of it is not as valuable, or people don't, you know, some of it's more metal content, but it was a good story because we were able to put something to use, which is what we always like to do if there's things in the house that people don't need or want anymore. Any other questions? I'm just looking to see if we had any other questions that I missed or anything. The other thought for everybody on the call is, if you want to stay connected with us, feel free to. You can find us on all the various social platforms. We do a lot of really fun stuff, particularly when COVID disappears. We can do a lot more fun stuff. But one of our favorite things is around Thanksgiving. We have a pie day. Everyone on the call, you're automatically enrolled to that, and you're welcome. We'll be giving out pies come Thanksgiving, hopefully in person. We'll see what happens, but feel free if you want to like us. And the other thing is, we'll be sending, everybody on the call will be getting a survey. And that survey helps guide us for future presentations, so we know what's on people's minds, so we can plan accordingly for guest speakers. Because this all came about, having Linda today, was when we did our initial ABCs of senior housing, there were a lot of legal questions. So we said, that's our likely next person. So we're going to strategize and figure out who the next person is. I think we've got some hands raised, so I might have missed. I apologize if I missed anything. Does anybody see any other questions I missed? Oh, Linda's contact information. I love that question. So Linda, how does somebody contact you if they want to, if they need help? Is it email? Is it call? What do you prefer?
So it's not so much what I prefer, it's what our clients typically use. So some of them are not so tech savvy, and so picking up a phone is fine. 610-566-4700. For those that are tech savvy or at least have a grandchild that can help them, the website is andersonelderlaw.com.
And you have a wonderful, and I apologize because I didn't get an opportunity in the beginning. You have a wonderful background. I have to say, you clearly have all the credentials and the experience. I know you've been doing this for, is it well over 30 years, if I'm correct? Is that sound about right?
Yeah, it was one of my first jobs, and the lawyer that was the department chair of the estate department came in and said, just keep track of those nursing home rules. It wasn't even called elder law at the time. So a long time.
It's changed. What year did it change? Any idea on when it changed?
It changes constantly, but the watershed mark for Medicaid was 2006. Okay.
I just saw a question come up. I don't know if you can see it, Linda, or not. Did you see the one about a burial plot while still qualifying for senior disabled? I think it's the last question.
What is the value limit for a disabled tenant who wants to purchase a burial plot as a real estate asset and not lose the Medicaid qualification? Well, this is a very interesting question. It's not, so if this were a law school exam, you could actually purchase unlimited burial plots and not have a Medicaid transfer penalty. It's not so much the burial plot that is actually going to cause a problem. There's actually by county an annual list that says how much an irrevocable burial prepayment arrangement should cost. And if it exceeds it, you have a potential Medicaid transfer penalty. And so the guideline in our, generally statewide used to be around 12,500 for a prepaid burial, including the plot and all the other arrangements. But if you look at Chester County, for instance, the number for the actual, maximum is actually much, much higher. Delaware County is higher as well. So what I would say is don't look at this as a Medicaid planning opportunity.
Mhm.
Look at this as a way to prepay your burial arrangements with what you really want. Medicaid planning includes a lot of really interesting ideas that are much better than pre-purchasing multiple burial plots.
I thought of something else, and that is a lot of people on the call. Lydia, you gave some wonderful resources during our first workshop, and we got a lot of calls after asking for that. Is that something you could provide now? And Linda, is there any other resources that you wanted to share for those listening that might be helpful to them?
Absolutely. So we try to list some of the resources on our website.
Okay.
I was actually just looking, Delaware County has a brand new health department. And so I was picking around through their new website on the health department, and they have wonderful resources on the health department. Each county also has what's called an area agency on aging. It's a AAA. Those AAAs are incredible resources, and they're not just online. You can actually make phone calls and they'll send you materials, including Medicare counseling on an annual basis. So there are lots of resources. And in Delaware County, Montgomery County, Chester County, all of those bar associations have a county elder law handbook. And so if you look at the county handbook, it usually has some county specific resources, and the content may be similar, but every county has a great elder law handbook. In Delaware County, it's called, I think, the Elder Law Resource Guide. And it's on the COSA, which is our AAA, and it's also on the Bar Association. But if you just Google Elder Law Handbook, Montgomery County, Chester County, Delaware County. There's even one at a Pennsylvania level for the Senior Lawyer's Guide.
And how about Lydia? You had
Sure.
Are you able to share those resources? Because I think they're really helpful to the listeners.
Sure. Again, the web is a wonderful tool. So if you can Google or have a grandchild who can help you, as Linda mentioned, CCRCs are the Department of Insurance. You can find disclosure statements. Sometimes you can find the contract online. Very important reading, not the most exciting reading. And again, why I would recommend having an attorney look at it. If you're looking at personal care communities or assisted living, they are governed by or regulated by the Department of Human Services in Pennsylvania. Again, you can go online. There's a section for the consumer. You can find annual survey reports because they are surveyed annually on an annual basis, and you can look at the reports. You might not understand them. Sometimes it's helpful to talk to somebody in the field to really understand what the survey is about. And also for skilled nursing facilities, they're governed by the Department of Health. Again, you can find the survey results online. You can also look at what's called their Medicare star rating, which is kind of a complicated rating, but you're basically looking the more stars, the better. So just a few resources.
Thank you. And I'm very grateful for everybody spending their time Saturday. I don't know if it was a great weather day. So we were talking earlier, Linda, about, our attendance sometimes is a factor of how nice it is inside and outside. And then I want to remind everyone, we're going to be doing this again on July 16th at 10 a.m. So it's a continuing series we've developed, or we're in the process of developing another speaker based on the feedback today. And again, the surveys, that you'll be getting a survey. We would be grateful. The more information you tell us, like what's important to you, will help for future events. But I just want to thank Linda for sharing. I greatly appreciate your knowledge, your expertise, your compassion. You clearly are a wonderful, wonderful resource for everybody that's listening. So thank you very much. And of course, Lydia, we're very grateful for everything you do and add. And of course, Tracy, she's my partner, so welcome or thank you. And everyone just have a wonderful day. If anybody has any other questions, they can reach out to the guest and certainly she'll be happy to help.
And Linda, you mentioned 2 checklists that you were going to send to us that we'll make sure everybody gets copies of as well.
Yep, I'll take care of
Thank
that on
you.
Monday. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Great day. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Morning.